Rick, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, were you talking to me? Ron, this is Ron.
No, I was just trying to hear if Rick can hear us. We can't, I haven't been able to hear him. I don't know if he's just, muted or he's having technical difficulties.
I'll text him.
So I'm on my phone. I don't think I'm going to get video. I don't know.
I can always send this part. It's kind of helpful to see, but I can verbally talk to this the best of my ability.
I see my own face on the.
I'm not hearing anything. Is anybody there?
Yeah, I'm a
Rick?
visitor.
Rick, can you hear us? He might be having some technical difficulties.
Well, Ron, for the sake of time, and we have Cynthia here, even though she's listed as me, she is here. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And Ron, this could potentially just be a private presentation to you.
Okay. I'm flattered.
Right? Okay, so today the goal is to do a presentation of the 2018 International Code Adoption Recommendations for the town of Nederland. What we're going to do today is give an overview of our recommended code changes, and then we'll be asking for your feedback on any of those proposed changes or areas you want to be sure town focuses on. The presentation is roughly 30 minutes, leaving the remaining 30 minutes for feedback. And I do just want to make note that we are recording this and we will upload this onto the website. So altogether, there are 15 code books that we're looking at considering, either through full adoption or partial adoption. And this PowerPoint, which I can send to you afterwards, Ron, highlights some of the changes we're recommending in the various slides. So the first thing is that there's a new book for the 2018 International Pool and Spa Code. The code language regarding pools and spas was previously incorporated into other code books. However, this year it's broken into its own independent code. So we are recommending adopting that in its entirety. There's also been a change in terms of how wind is calculated. Nederland is in climate zone 7, where the wind speed used to be based on 3-second gusts. The wind speed has now changed to an ultimate wind speed. Nederland was 130 miles per hour, but based on the 100-year occurrence, is now around 140 miles per hour. There's also a 700-year occurrence, in which case the wind speed actually increases to 168 miles per hour. And then Boulder County has also done their own wind study assessment, and they have identified the speed for Nederland to be 175 miles per hour. So Safeville, which is the town's building official, is recommending that we use 144 miles per hour as the wind speed, and that's for two reasons. First, it's only a slight increase from the 130 miles per hour. And also the cost of trying to secure materials for 175 miles per hour is really high. And so it makes it more cost effective to do the slight increase to 144 versus going all the way to 175. There's also been an increase in stud height. Before, the stud height didn't exceed 10 feet, which really limited contractors in building a lot of the ceiling designs that people are interested in. In addition to the stud height, though, there's also the change in the table in the International Residential Code that focuses on making it a lot more readable for homeowners. They really designed the code with homeowners in mind, making it more user-friendly. We know that in Nederland, a lot of people like to build log homes. So the new code allows log buildings to meet the requirements of the thermal envelope which will make those homes more energy efficient. There's also a series of appendices that town must adopt separately in order for them to be integrated into code. Currently, the 2018 Building Code Administrative Team are reviewing all the appendices to make a determination on which ones town should consider adopting. Outlined in this slide, though, which again I will send to you, Ron, and I believe Scott is on and hopefully can see, we have listed the appendices that Safe Built is recommending. Scott, can you see our PowerPoint here?
I can, yeah.
Okay, hi and welcome. The one-story detached accessory structures, that actually hasn't changed, which is nice because it allows consistency between code years. So what we're looking at is that there would be no permit required if the structure is under 200 square feet. With regards to relocation of existing structures, the current code excludes relocating structures that are less than 120 square feet. Safe Build is recommending that they be changed to 200 square feet in order to match the International Building Code and International Residential Code. For this, you can see from the chart, and again, Ron, I'll send it, there's the only change with regards to wall and ceiling insulation is the above grade walls. The first number listed is the interior thermal envelope, and the +5 accounts for the shear wall. R20 is what's common for 2x6 walls, while R13 accommodates 2x4 walls, which is why there are two sets of numbers in the above grade wall column. And the next two slides that we have show examples of what that insulation will look like based on the standards that are listed. So first you have, depending on size, how it would look. And then we have the continuous versus cavity insulation and the difference in how those would look. With regards to window U factor, there's really just a minor change. It's decreased to 0.30, and the lower the number, the more efficient the windows are. So we're looking at every year there's been a decrease for more energy efficient windows, but no change to skylights for 2018. We've provided a picture of what typically that sticker looks like on a window. Most standard windows are actually 0.27 U factor, so they are below the threshold of what we are recommending for code at 0.30. There's also information about PV systems as a part of the International Residential Code. And really in Netherlands, we've seen an increase in the number of installations of these systems. So Safe Built has reassured us that their electrical inspectors are knowledgeable about PV systems and can really help our community as we see more of those reviews coming forward. When it comes to the energy code in terms of cost savings, there actually really isn't much difference between 2012 and 2018. However, we did identify that Boulder County has stricter energy conservation codes. So Garrett McDaniel, who is our sustainability coordinator, is in the process of completing a comparison between the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and Boulder County's code, and is going to provide recommendations on which codes that we should adopt and if we can integrate the two together. Also, as a part of our 2018 building code, we are looking to really revitalize our construction and demolition program, which is an incentive program encouraging Netherlands builders to recycle on-site debris and divert it from local landfills. A deposit is paid based on the project type and square footage and is refundable in full or in part based on the project's documented diversion rate. The program has actually been around for a few years, but has not been as successful as I think we initially intended it to be. So as a part of the building code update, we're going to seek to really revitalize that program by redesigning it in a way that works for the community. So I am now going to turn it over to Rick Hendrickson, who I believe can hear us, and vice versa, to go over 2018 fire code changes.
I can hear you now. Okay, looks like we have a couple people. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Hear you?
Okay, great.
I can hear you.
Okay, so a bunch of stuff here on the 2018 fire code. The biggest changes are actually some improvements that we think will help us out, kind of, well, for fire safety in general. In Chapter 3, they added a new section on mobile food preparation vehicles or food trucks. We've had really no way to really enforce anything with that. We're getting more and more of those in town. We're actually also looking at a front range wide inspection for them so that if we're not duplicating fees all over the place, so they don't have to get a permit for Denver and one for Boulder and one from us and one from everybody. We're looking at kind of doing that as a one size fits all thing, and this is really going to help having this new chapter and or this new section in the fire code. In Chapter 9, under fire protection systems, we're now going to be able to allow the water mist suppression systems, which are a higher pressure, lower volume system. I think they're going to end up being really good for retrofits. Fairly expensive for a new home construction, but because they're simpler to put in, they probably work out well for other situations. Chapter 11, this is one that will have a little bit of a cost locally, and that's CO detection is required in daycares and schools. They allow that existing daycares that don't have an alarm systems can just do the plug-in type CO detection. So you're looking $40-50 or whatever one costs to plug it in. And they're in or near their sleeping areas. So that's good. I think that's worth doing. One thing that's kind of big, and Miranda kind of mentioned earlier, that with PV systems and other energy systems, for the new codes, they put this all in one chapter. For folks who were building before and doing these, and for us inspecting, we had to dig through a lot of different chapters and to find all this information. Well, it's all in one place now. Chapter 39 is a new chapter on processing and extraction facilities. That's primarily for the marijuana businesses that are using a volatile liquid to do their, or gas to do their extraction. As far as I know, we only have one operation in town that's legally doing extraction, and they're using a different system. It's not a flammable liquid or gas, so that's good, but we'll have it there for other reference or for future builds. One of the things to keep in mind with fire code is the fire code itself really only applies to commercial properties, not for residential. A couple minor places where it does apply to residential, but really it's commercial. These are the changes. Stick back to the other one, please. Thanks. These are the only ones that really affect Netherland. Most of the changes in the fire code, other than that reorganization of some things and adding what I showed you there, have to do with much larger buildings. And so not a lot of cost just with the code change. So now the next one. So the things that we're looking for from the fire department standpoint, the first one is residential fire suppression systems, sprinklers. This is an amendment, or it's not making an amendment to the current residential code. When we adopted the 2012 code, they amended out the sprinkler requirement that was built into the code along with everything else in that code. We would like to not amend that out anymore. These, as you probably know, are primarily life safety systems, but most of the time they will put out the fire, as we found out on Alpine Drive in July with that fire there. 2 of the sprinklers did activate. It put out the fire, prevented further injury, prevented further damage, did exactly what it was supposed to do. and that's a big thing for us. Second thing is exterior fire resistance and required defensible space. We know that our entire town is at either an immediate or indirect threat to wildland fire. We've seen it all over the West over the last couple of years. And we would like to see all new structures be required to have the same levels of exterior fire resistance and defensible space. To do that, what we're proposing is we pull the WUI requirements from the Boulder County Code pretty much straight over into our code. We've amended, or not amended it, but just taken out the specific references to Boulder County, except where they were relevant for some reason, and just looking at the building construction types and the defensible space. This was one of the things that was a number one priority for us in the CPAW grant that we had recently, an evaluation done of our wildfire preparedness for town. And they said bringing these codes up to date and getting this required resistance was utmost importance. We think it'll also make it easier for builders because regardless of whether they're building just outside of town or in town, they'll be looking at the same code. And then the third thing we wanted to add here was a new chapter 40, storage of distilled spirits and wines. This, we've had people ask about that in town. We know there's one or two distilleries in Gilpin County. I think it's just a matter of time. This actually makes it easier for us to, or for these potential owners to operate these, because it kind of allows a mid-level storage requirements for those businesses, because in the past we had to go with a higher level because of the flammability of the liquids, but this does create kind of a mid-level. So it's not quite as steep a requirement as the old storage requirements. Should make it a little bit easier to do with that. And what we'd be doing, that new chapter 40 is already written in the 2021 code. We'd just be taking it out of the 21 code and amending it into the 18 code.
Is this just for distilleries, or does this mean bars and restaurants also?
It's specific to distilleries because of the quantities that they have in large storage.
So is there any storage requirements for bars and restaurants?
Not other than what's already there.
And is there something there?
Well, nothing's changing. Nothing that's going to affect any of them in town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. Okay, so a little bit more on suppression systems for residences. In 2019, you can see there were a lot of home fires, a lot of deaths, a lot of injuries. Putting sprinkler systems in homes decreases both the resident and firefighter death rates by 80%. And that's huge. And a lot of the reason for the firefighter reduction is that homes are being built much lighter materials. They burn through really quick, and floors give way, walls give way much quicker in a fire. If we have a sprinkler system in, that just slows that process down dramatically, and much safer both for the resident and for us. You can see the 96% of the time fire sprinklers keep the fire to the room of origin. There's a link there to a report on sprinklers. And let's see. And Miranda, did we get that video to work?
No, unfortunately, there's no way to show without having a delay in the audio.
Okay, well, let's not do that then. So if you guys get a copy of this presentation, you can take a look at this video. It's only about 1.5 minutes long. Just points out a lot of really good reasons for residential sprinkler systems, safety, and everything else from there. it's very well done. So, okay, let's move on to the next one. Oh, so this is kind of a generic slide on the kind of things we're doing. Found that most of the builders up here, I talked to half a dozen different builders, and they're pretty much already doing all of these things, particularly houses that are near on the edges of town, but we need to see it all the way through town. Our current code requires that within 5 feet of a property line, if your house is within 5 feet of a property line, you've got to meet all these requirements already. If you're within 20 feet, you have to meet a slightly stepped down version of this. And the problem is if you get beyond that 20 feet, if your house is in the middle of your lot, there's no requirement for this. And as we've seen the last couple of years, the embers don't care how close your house is to a property line. And that's what's burning down most of these houses. So we want to harden the houses, make it a requirement for anything new, any significant remodel, that we get the exterior flammability done there. So some of these requirements
in the commercial areas, is this going to apply also, or is this just residential?
This should apply to all.
Okay.
And actually the Kathmandu building, they are using hardy board on the exterior there where it's not the brick. So they're doing it already, and that wasn't at our request. They're just doing that. So again, we're looking at using some of the county requirements, as I mentioned before, to make this happen throughout town, not just where you're close to the property line. And interestingly, the initial requirements for fire resistance started back in the 1800s on commercial buildings because of the mega fires, the big conflagrations in Boston, New York, and all these other cities that had major fires. So they figured out how to do it on commercial buildings a long time ago. And now we want to put it on residential and then upgrade it a little bit for commercial. Next slide. So this is kind of some generic numbers that Headwaters Economic out of Idaho came up with. I think the total numbers probably don't make a lot of sense for here, but just for comparison, things like hardy board are actually cheaper than a lot of the wood products that people have been putting on their house, on the exterior siding. A lot of people don't like the way they look, know that. There are other options as well. We've seen stucco and metal and rock and all kinds of stuff put on exteriors, but they do cost money. So just some ballpark numbers for you there. Okay, and next. So here's just some approximate costs. I queried a handful of builders in town to get estimates from them on these prices. They're not going to be 100%, but it gives you a rough idea. For siding, a non-ignition resistant basic wood siding, about $4 a square foot. Like the cheap wood press board is less than that. Not ignition resistant. You get into like the hardy board, it is ignition resistant at around $3 a square foot. Stucco around $4, and stone or something else is going to go up from there. On decks, you can put a basic wood deck up with small material pretty cheap. It's still a lot more expensive than I thought because I just looked at trying to add on to mine. And then if you're going to move up to something that's ignition resistant, it is going to cost you more. And then if you want wood, something that's ignition resistant like Ipe, you're going to pay a lot more for that. I think that's just if that's what you want, you're going to have to pay more. We all know we want things in our houses that are going to cost more, and we make those choices. So Hopefully that's not a huge factor for folks there. Sprinklers, cost of sprinklers. So the typical NFPA spec 13D residential system, this $5 to $6 a square foot, probably pretty on the lower end for up here. We have significant increase in costs for a couple of reasons. One is just there's no contractors up here that put those in. It's everybody's coming up from below, so they're charging more for that. All the systems I've seen up here are requiring antifreeze. That adds to the price. We have almost every house up here has vaulted ceilings, and that takes more time to put in. I've seen where sprinkler installers up here have had to rent lifts and other things to get up into those ceilings. So, yep, that raises the price as well. If you want to build a very simple house with flat ceilings, you can probably do it in that lower price range, but that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing too many of those houses up here. Oh. Okay, that is all that I've got on mine.
Thanks, Rick. So Cynthia Bakke is our Deputy Zoning Administrator. She spent some time looking at affordable housing goals that the Board of Trustees and Planning Commission have worked on over the last 5 years. And I'm going to turn it over to her to share a brief overview of those initiatives.
Hey there, everyone. Hi, Ron. Hi, Scott. Thanks for joining us today. I am not showing up as my name. I'm showing up as Miranda Fisher, host, and we tried to resolve this issue today, but for some reason it didn't work, so I apologize for any confusion. So I had made a document that was included in the Board of Trustees packet. You don't see that here, but basically I went over the housing affordability goals by the Planning Commission, and that was begun with a public forum in 2015. It was a public forum on affordable housing, and we discussed the definition of affordable housing. What does that actually mean, aside from just the words? The considerations and barriers, as well as goals. So that kind of kicked us off in looking at the different housing affordability goals. I've been with the town long enough to see these initiated and then all the way through to where we are presently. So kind of kicked that off after the public forum on affordable housing, January 27, 2016. There were work goals that were identified and they were discussed at that meeting, and they included areas and opportunities below. So those areas that we discussed in no particular order are an administrative review of under 4 units, provided that the zoning requirements were met. Previously, if you wanted to have a duplex up to 4 units, you'd have to go through a special review use application. And that was that idea, that proposal was introduced at the Planning Commission December 14, 2016. There was a public hearing there, and they came up with an ordinance pretty quickly. That was Ordinance 746, and that was adopted as of February 17th, 2017. So that was actually exciting to see that goal because other goals did spend several years being discussed. So the Affordable Housing Project by Boulder County Housing Authority, that was originally introduced via Planned Unit Development January 2017. They had requested an extension to continue working on it in 2018 and then came back before the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees in February and March of 2018. At that March 20th, 2018 meeting of the Board of Trustees, they were approved for their PUD along with the right-of-way vacations that flank the building. And that brings Boulder County Housing Authority up to what I would estimate to be about 50 units within the town. So there's the 26 units in Tungsten Village that's nearby to Scott and Mandy Papich. And then there are others throughout the town, 6 different homes on Rodeo Court, 12 units among the 3 apartments buildings of the Beaver Creek Apartments, and then also the 6 units over at Prime Haven, in addition to these 26 units in Tungsten Village. So they do have about 50 total affordable housing units. Continuing on in terms of the Planning Commission specific goals, they had discussed accessory dwelling units and creating that regulation. That started out in 2017 in February and took a few years, but there was an ordinance, ultimately adopted it in 2018, and then subsequent ordinance adopted in 2020. So that took a while to get to the end result, but we now have regulations that allow accessory dwelling units, and accessory dwelling units are the mother-in-law type units, and their specifications as to whether or not it's an integrated unit inside a home or if it's detached. They have differing regulations, but those were passed. We discussed short-term rental regulations. That was a very long discussion. We began that discussion in 2016 in January, and then there was ongoing discussion all the way up to fall of 2019, and that was when the first ordinances were established for the short-term rental. There was some amendment to the business licensing code and the addition of an occupational tax for lodging. So all of those ordinances were added 2019, 2020, I believe. There was discussion about elimination of barriers to mixed use developments in commercial zones. That was a Board of Trustees' desire to see a reduction of barriers to mixed use type of opportunities. And the board had originally discussed that at a joint Board of Trustees Planning Commission work session, October 2017. Took a little bit of time, but there was an ordinance that was adopted May 1st of 2018. There are some caveats based on the number of units being proposed and or the size of the building, but in general, along with the desire to see those barriers reduced, which was a comprehensive plan goal, that was something that the Planning Commission tackled and felt that they had promoted mixed use without going overboard. There were some goals that were discussed which did not result in ordinances. So at the initial behest of talking about rental licensing, the Planning Commission started the discussion about long-term rental, and that was July 27, 2016. So they discussed that at a commission meeting. They came forward with Planning Commission recommendations to approve after discussion, and that was December of 2016. And that met with a lot of opposition from residents. Came to that meeting and were not in support of long-term rental. They felt that that was too much inhibition of their private property rights. And so the Planning Commission pivoted at that point to discuss short-term rental, figuring that it would be tackle that as there was a lot less at the time. Took a few years to get those short-term rental regulations, and in the interim, we definitely did see that use grow pretty exponentially until the regulations were laid down. So the long-term rental status is that it's been discussed a few times, but the town has not adopted any long-term rental regulations. They also discussed financial incentives for affordable housing. They introduced that at the beginning of 2016 in January as part of the work plan goals for the Planning Commission. They have not adopted incentives, so that hasn't had traction, although it was discussed a couple times. And then the last thing that wasn't included that I had subsequently added, but it wasn't included in that Board of Trustees packet that I mentioned at the Board of Trustees meeting, which was another goal about the creation of overlay districts. And the overlay districts would have associated zoning that would be an overlay to the area that they were in. So if the town decided to make a historic overlay district, then it would have zoning that would be an overlay in that area specific to those properties. So on those latter three, long-term rental, financial incentives for affordable housing, and the creation of overlay districts, the status is that they have not adopted long-term rental regulation incentives or adopted overlay districts. So they haven't made any progress on those. And this discussion came up as we've discussed other aspects and changes that are happening. And so there was conversation about what about affordable housing and how is that going to be addressed? So I wanted to provide this slide with some background as to what has the Planning Commission discussed just accomplished? Where do we stand now? I wouldn't say that we've eliminated, with the Planning Commission sword, we've eliminated the challenge for affordable housing. It definitely exists and it is very market driven. But I did want to note that there was progress made on these goals. And the board can consider from here if those goals are serving their needs and if they want to make progress on those other goals, or if the Planning Commission is going to be looking at new work plan goals as we move forward into the future. Does anyone have any questions about the information that you're seeing there?
I think we're going to try to save questions for the end because we have a few more
Oh.
slides to go through.
Sorry about that, Maria.
Thanks. Yeah, so in addition to those initiatives related to housing, Karen Garrity, town administrator, has identified some housing assistance programs that Nederland residents may qualify for, and she's going to give a brief overview of those.
Thank you, Miranda. The other thing I wanted to say, just piggybacking off of what Cynthia presented, is that we do have a housing subcommittee in our Vision 2030 larger group, the advisory committee, and they are looking at things like affordable housing incentives. So I just wanted you to know the conversation hasn't stopped completely. It's just sort of morphed into part of the envisioning conversation. But yes, the Board of Trustees, of course, there are a couple members who were very concerned about the potential for the increased cost in housing for especially individuals who might want to build a home. And so they asked that we look into what sort of assistance is already out there. So the state does have two bodies that do provide housing assistance. One is a Division of Housing, which is part of the Department of Local Affairs, and they provide down payment assistance as well as other funding opportunities for first-time home buyers. They also can provide low interest revolving loan funds for homeowner repairs, modification, as well as new construction. And then the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, they're actually a financial institution and they are mission-based and they support first-time home buyers and multifamily projects with low interest loans. And then they do have a grant program for down payment assistance. So that's just to give you all an idea of what's out there and what is available to especially the individuals or a developer who wants to build a multifamily project. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. So obviously today is a charrette, so we thank you for coming. We do have 2 more charrettes scheduled for tomorrow, so spread the word. And we are presenting to boards and commission meetings. The focus of March is really to gain as much public input as we possibly can. After public vetting is over, the plan is to come back before the Board of Trustees and do a work session on April 6th, where we will go over all the feedback we obtained from our public meetings and any modifications to the recommendations that we're proposing. Then after that work session, we will hold a public hearing for the ordinance in May. I just wanted to kind of add some additional slides to the presentation about like a follow-up from other meetings. So the Board of Trustees at their March 2nd meeting have requested that our administrative committee look into sustainable building materials, home orientation so that they could capitalize on passive solar and passive heating and cooling. So I will again, we'll send this PowerPoint out, but there are links that we have been providing to the Board of Trustees in the community that add to those areas of interest. And before we turn it over for questions, I just wanted to note that we do now have an official 2018 building code website page. I put the link into this PowerPoint, but you can also access it on the right-hand side of our homepage, kind of halfway down with all the other icons. And I showed a picture of where you'd see that. So we'd like to take kind of the last 20 minutes to answer any questions you have or hear your feedback. We do have a hard stop at 4, so Scott and Ron, if you just want to kind of take the remaining time, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do either of you have any recommendations?
I have a lot of thoughts that went really
Okay.
fast, and what I would like, you said you'd send that to me. I think I'll tune in tomorrow.
Okay.
Early on, I had some questions, but again, I'm on my phone. I'm in town, and I didn't have a pencil with me to take notes. So I would like to review the whole thing since you're going to send it to me, and I'll probably come on one of the other charrettes with some comments. I did. The one thing I was curious about was the overlay zone idea and where that's at, or if there's any movement in any direction on that, or is it just stagnant?
I'd say, Ron, this is Cynthia, say that it's stagnant. I would say that was one of the items that was initially discussed back in 2016 and wasn't undertaken. It was something that former town administrator Alicia Reese had brought up and said that that can be a way to consider zoning a little bit differently if it's pertinent to create overlay districts, although I wouldn't say we had much discussion after that as we were tackling other items. There was also a lot of staff turnover during those years. So it was, there was a bit of a pause. It was before Karen came to us and of course Miranda. And so we had a few years where it was challenging, I would say, to nail down all of these items because we were really short-staffed at the time.
One thing,
so that-
Ron,
Yes.
Karen, one thing I wanted to say is that, you know, overlay districts are more common for things like historic preservation or things along that line. And when you talk about, if you're really talking about affordable housing, which I'm making that assumption, although Ron, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, looking at incentives for building affordable housing for developers and for the individual residential developer is sort of the way that things have developed over the last 6 to 10 years. And I did just want to point out that Longmont's done some really interesting work on that with changing their code and to provide incentives for affordable housing. So I don't know if that's specifically what you were talking about with overlay district, but I just wanted to provide that information.
The thing that had come to mind when Dallas Masters was on the council, and I think it was within the last 3 to 4 years, he had mentioned that somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, and I think it was Seattle, that they had taken an area and had some sort of incentivized program or a device that had an element of where bring us a plan, if we like it, we'll approve it, as opposed to having to fit something entirely into a code that was written long ago before there were really the fire.
Ron, I remember that, and I'm pretty sure it was specific to accessory dwelling units, because they have done in that community some very interesting things having to do with promoting, advancing affordable housing through accessory dwelling units. So I believe that's when he was talking about that, when we were trying to finalize our ADU ordinance. That's my memory.
I never had a chance to talk with him in terms of what it was specifically, but it piqued my interest at the time and still does. So is there a manner or method that we could revive this and get it from stagnant status to consideration status?
I'll let Karen kind of take hold of this, but I would say that, those latter 3 were planning commission goals. And they briefly discussed them, but hadn't made any traction on them. So I'm kind of curious, are these still goals that the Planning Commission wants to seek? And are they in line with the board goals? So I didn't really preface very well in my intro to talking about the affordable housing. The Board of Trustees had gone on a retreat in 2016, 2015, and had talked about their 3 main goals one of them being housing and affordable housing as a subset. And so that is where all of those affordable housing goals came from the Planning Commission. Is the board had a general housing theme, and then the Planning Commission was breaking that out as to, well, how could we address that, given that we know this is a market-driven economy, but what can we do with respect to zoning and other regulations? And so, you know, I'm gonna let Karen maybe tackle this, or maybe Miranda, and see, is
Sure,
that something?
Sure, I don't mind doing a little bit of research, Ron. But as I said, there's different tactics that are sort of more common now that are going on, which I believe is what's being talked about. But I'm happy to look into that overlay district a little bit deeper to see if there is any community that has done it specifically for affordable housing. I think I understand that's what you're interested in, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
not
I'll do
totally,
that.
but
And
in part.
okay, I'll
So,
do a little bit of research on it. And of course, if you know anything about it, you can send that to me as well.
all right. Well, I'll do some research too. It's unfortunate that the housing committee and none of the other members are on and have seen this presentation. Maybe it'll make some effort to see future ones, because their current discussions are not in line with the changes. At least I don't believe they are, that you've been presenting today. And I would very much like some of them to. I'll bug them and try and get them to come
Yeah,
to one
well,
of the shirts.
one of the things I recommended they all do is look at Longmont's changes to their code, because I think they've done a really good job of being comprehensive regarding affordable housing and incentives. I do want to leave Scott some time though to ask some questions too, since we're, you know.
Oh, there is somebody else on. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
Hey,
I didn't
Ron,
mean to monopolize.
Ron, this is Cynthia. I just want to say something really quick. So with respect to, I don't know if they're going to make you know, any further goals toward an overlay district, although there has been discussion of financial incentives. Now, the challenge with the town is that the incentive that most people are asking for is, can you write off those PIF prices? Those are the biggest costs generally going with building permits. And we have to pay for the usage of the wastewater treatment plant, future infrastructure upgrades, future water rights, and things like that. And so I don't know that Chris Pelletier is amenable to writing off PIFs. The other side of this that's good to keep in mind is, for our building permits, anything that isn't a town fee, I'm talking about PIFs or the C&D, you know, if there's not a hard fee from the town and it's with respect to permitting, we contract our services with SafeBuilt, who gets 80% of all those fees, not the PIFs, not the TAPs, not any town fees, but the permit fee, the plan review fee, the electrical fee, you know, any of these associated building permit fees, they get 80% of it. And the town gets 20. So if we consider, hey, can we write something off? The largest portion of that is from SafeBuilt. I don't know if they will be, and if the town is writing off permit fees, it pretty much receives nothing. So
Well,
I just kind of want to throw that out there, not to discount anything that you're saying or any need for financial incentives. Just what is the room for the town to be able to offer that?
Well, I wasn't in favor. You can't build a sewer plant without the PIF fees, but certainly amortizing them until such time as you need it would be a tremendous incentive, rather than a total 100% upfront cost. That would make a huge difference in terms of the type of housing that could be brought forward. And I don't know if that's ever been considered or not, but
I don't think so, Ron. Yeah,
well, they might
I don't
want
know. I haven't heard it.
I know that lots of fees that are demanded by statute or by ordinance up front, but currently, if amortized, would make a huge difference in the construction cost overall, and particularly the amount of interest that the developer would have to pay on those fees to be able to come up with them. So that wouldn't eliminate them, but it would stretch them out over time, and that would make a huge difference.
Have you made that recommendation at the Envision Housing Subcommittee?
I have not, because the discussions have gone in other directions, and I've more been an observer than a participant, but I certainly could, and I could try this Friday's meeting and see if it gets any traction.
So we only have
Okay.
about 9 minutes left, and I want to be sure that if Scott has any questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Scott, do you have any questions?
I'm in observation mode today, guys. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So Ron, you got 9 minutes left. Anything else?
Not that I can dredge up right now, but I'll sure try to tomorrow.
Well, and I will, it'll take me about 24 hours, but I will post all these presentations on that website page, along with any additional resources that are provided in these follow-up questions. So I encourage everyone to check back to that site often, because we'll have a lot of information coming from there.
Okay, well presented presentation. Thank you.
Thank you both for coming.
Thanks.
Tell other members of the public to attend. Please.
All right, I'll try.
Thanks.
Okay, goodbye, all.
Bye.
Bye, Ron. Bye, Scott.
you.
Miranda, I'm gonna exit out of the meeting now so you can continue. Is that acceptable?
Yes, please, so I can stop recording.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Miranda, I mean, I was